All right. So it's 1 p.m. So I guess we can start. So hello, everybody. My name is Christine Lucero, and on behalf of the ASEAN Australia Smart Cities Trust Fund team, I'd like to welcome everybody to today's webinar. So this webinar is the seventh of our ongoing ASEAN Australia Smart Cities webinar series, with each session focusing on a specific digital solution that aims to help cities to tackle specific issues related to the improvement of city planning systems, service delivery, and financial management. So please do sign up to our mailing list using the QR code or the link on the upper side of your screen if you wish to receive updates about our upcoming sessions and events. So before we proceed with today's discussion, just some quick housekeeping announcements for everybody to keep in mind. So first, the slide presentations from this session will be shared with everybody a day or two after the webinar, along with the link to the webinar recording, which we will be uploading to our YouTube channel. Secondly, we'll be sharing the QR code and the link to our webinar evaluation form at the end of today's session, which we hope you'll take the time to fill out, and it will only take you 5 minutes to do so. And this will help us to understand you, our audience, as well as to improve our upcoming webinars. And lastly, we encourage everybody to participate during our Q&A session by submitting your questions at any point during the webinar through the Q&A box below. So when submitting your questions, please also indicate which speaker you are directing your questions to before your actual questions. And we'll try to accommodate as many questions as time will allow. And with these housekeeping announcements over, I'd like to turn over the floor to our webinar moderator, who is the Project Administration Unit Head of the Asian Development Bank's Southeast Asia Department, Mr. Stephen Shipani. So Stephen is ADB's tourism sector focal for the Greater Mekong sub-region and works closely with government and private sector to prepare and implement investments and technical systems projects that improve tourism competitiveness and sustainability. So with that, over to you, Stephen.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Christine, for the nice introduction. And first, let me just start by saying good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to wherever it is that you're joining us from. I'd also like to once again welcome everyone to the 7th edition of the ASEAN Australia Smart Cities webinar. As Christine mentioned, my name is Stephen Shipani. I'm the ADB staff handling our tourism work in Southeast Asia, and I'm really pleased to be your moderator today. We've set up a really engaging program with some outstanding expert speakers that are going to talk us through how we can promote a smart tourism and a sustainable tourism recovery by using virtual reality and other digital resources. Before we get started, I'd really like to thank the Australian government's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade for supporting the ASEAN Australia Smart Cities Trust Fund, and also recognize my ADB colleagues and our technical team for the excellent webinar arrangements. Before I introduce our first speaker, I thought we'd start with a poll on how well you, the audience, thinks that digital solutions in general are being used to support tourism in your destination or in your city. So we're going to flash up a poll here now, and everyone's encouraged to vote. So how well do you think the digital solutions are being used in your city or destination to promote tourism? Once again, everyone's encouraged to vote. This is just going to kind of give us a gauge on how well you think some of these digital technologies, we'll get into virtual reality and augmented reality and others later, are being done to promote the tourism sector. Okay, we're going to give about another 5 seconds. Look at that, and they're up. So here we see that most people think it's being done fairly well, very well or extremely well is just about 35%. So we see there's a lot of room to do, a lot of room to improve how well we're using digital technologies, cutting edge digital technologies that'll be presented in today's webinar to promote tourism. I would suspect that most of us are using digital technologies for destination marketing, for booking services, payments, and others. I'm not sure how many destinations are actually using virtual augmented reality. So thank you for that. And this gives us a good idea of where we're starting from. So I think we can close that now. We can close the poll. So with that, we're going to go on to our first speaker today. I think we're very fortunate to have Mr. Eric Champion, who's the honorary professor at the Australian National University's Center for Digital Humanities Research. Eric, he specializes in virtual heritage. He was previously the UNESCO Chair of Cultural Heritage and Visualization, and a professor at Curtin University in Perth, Western Australia. Once again, we're fortunate to have Eric. He's going to introduce us to virtual reality and extended reality technologies, how we can use this technology to promote tourism, to promote heritage conservation, and to improve the overall experience for tourists visiting urban destinations. So with that, I'm delighted to introduce Eric. And Eric, over to you for your presentation, please.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and what a wonderful event to talk at. It's afternoon for me and for most of you, and I will be speaking for about just under 8 minutes. So if we could have the first slide, please. Cool. So my background is actually an academic dealing with cultural heritage, virtual reality, augmented reality, and so forth. And I'm going to explain a couple of the problems with them. I'm not expecting you to read the books I've written, but I am suggesting if you find any of this interesting and you want to have, for example, more examples and links to case studies, in the bottom right, you will see 2 images of people with some of these devices on, and they will actually link in the slides to the tourism articles which I've written for the conversation, which go through a list of the more exciting experiential ways you can use augmented reality, mixed reality, and so forth. Next slide, please. Thank you. So one of the problems with the whole spectrum, if you like, is that, well, nobody completely agrees and no one's completely applying it the same way. Augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, and something else called augmented virtuality. This is all apparently confusing to many people. If you look at the bottom left-hand side, you will see a spectrum of these devices. And the original authors, Milgram et al. In 1994, said it's all part of this mixed reality spectrum. So you go from the real environment through augmented reality, through a virtual environment, which is augmented with the real world, to virtual reality. And people find this confusing. So if you look on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see pictures of these different examples of dimensions of reality and the virtual, these hybrid modes. And mixed reality, to some people, is where you cannot tell the distinction or where it doesn't matter. And the interesting thing is, from our point of view, you're experiencing not a technology in terms of how many pixels of a screen are augmented or real, but how well your brain decides this is the real world together. So many people have become confused by this. And when you download an augmented reality application on your phone, you'll often find that the phone is actually just pushing a virtual object on your camera screen. It's not layering it into the 3D world. And augmented reality originally meant augmented object appears to be in the real world around you. It doesn't just float. So we have this already a distinction between layered augmented reality and inserted augmented reality. So no wonder people have got confused. And the researchers, and we're talking about virtual reality, which originally came from theater, but which has been around for at least the 1960s, and augmented reality as well since the 1960s. This has led people to come up with the term extended reality to cover all these different dimensions. And there is another reason why we say extended reality or XR, which I'll get to in the next slide, please. Another problem is all these devices which have different layers of reality. And this slide or poster on the right-hand side shows you some of the consumer level devices that you can get, which are typically more virtual reality or mixed reality. The most famous example is the HoloLens. So you put on these big goggles, if you like, you see the real world, and then it layers with what it calls a holograms, but are not really holograms, these videos or 3D objects, and you can point at them, and you can use your voice, and you can move them around, and you can share them with people. And that's wonderful, except these devices like the Microsoft HoloLens, they're out of date by the time you buy them. So the content and the technology has real trouble meshing and creating these wonderful experiences for you to use. So there's this problem with perceived obsolescence as well, that they're not quite recent, and designed obsolescence, like with the Magic Leap, which only seems to last about a year technically. But the interesting thing is that a lot of the content makers are very, very available. They're free. You can get Google AR Core, you can get Apple AR Kit, you can get other things like AR Frame to build them. And what people have decided is to make sure that the public fully understand and don't get bogged down with the layers of the words augmented and mixed and virtual, is with extended reality, the software now works out the device you're using and it creates it for you, it calibrates for you. So you don't need to worry if you're looking at it on a phone or a laptop or a headset, or if it's a mixed reality or stereo virtual reality made for each eye with spatial depth. The software does it for you. And there are two formats that I know of, OpenXR and WebXR. But the other interesting thing about them is that they will now be based in the browser. So depending on the Internet Explorer or whatever the new Microsoft one is, a Chrome, Firefox, Safari, it won't ask you to download software. It will work on your phone or your laptop. And this is wonderful for content providers. Next slide, please. So this is an example of mixed reality. And I can see I'm going to have to go quite quickly through the screens. We've been working with museums so that people with the mixed reality headsets on, they can see the past and they can move objects. And when they move, say, for example, in a boat, a recreation, or in a museum, a map appears and 3D objects appear and they can share with another person. But the more interesting thing with mixed reality is if you have these goggles on and someone else has these goggles or headsets on, you can see different things of the same thing. You can see different aspects from different interpretations. So you can actually create layered history and people can learn to share their perceived reality by holding objects or pointing or talking. So the maps, the virtual maps, which can appear on the ground with the 3D and so forth, they can work off the internet as well. And this is all using a fairly common game engine called Unity. Next slide, please. And if you can see, it's a bit slow on my internet, but this is actually two people using totally different devices controlling the one body. So this is an intern project. A French student came and asked me to work out how to do VR for an archaeology site. And one person actually isn't really in a VR. They have what's called a leap controller in a bandana, and it's a camera tracker, and it tracks their real hands and makes the virtual hands mirror them. And the other person is in a VR, as you can see there in the front, and they're controlling the legs. So one person controls arms, one person controls legs, and they have to learn to climb and collect things together. There's all these interesting possibilities for tourism. Next slide, please. So I have last 4 or 5 years been running heritage workshops to show councils, museums, galleries, architecture and archaeology students how they can develop games themselves to get people engaged. Because the interesting thing about games, as I discovered in my research, is if you tell someone this is a game, they learn how to use it very quickly. But if you tell them it's an archaeological or historical simulation, they get very confused. So in a half a day to a day with these students, we've managed to create all these interesting augmented mixed reality prototypes, which allow people to, say, engage with tourism and archives just based on their phone, or for using QR cards. Next, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I've only got 8 minutes, so I'll just briefly say one of the major problems has been the lack of resources, and the 3D models that the academics talk about don't exist. So what we really require is a framework whereby the device is not important. It will just work on your device, but the content can continually be updated and improved. And I think for tourism, it's very interesting because there's all these ways in which you can experience the past. And for example, in my state, Western Australia, they've now providing funding for Indigenous tourism, which is a perfect vehicle to augment, not just visually, but also in terms of audio, for example, stories of the past over the landscape. So it's a fascinating exercise, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have about some of these projects I've shown. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. That was fantastic, and that was a fantastic overview. You know, I think your presentation touched on a couple of interesting points. One of those is just, you know, educating destination managers and tourism managers and decision makers about what's available in terms of virtual or augmented reality or these other tools to better present your tourist destination. The second one I heard is that this issue of capacity. So, you know, training local people to actually to be able to develop the content to you know, work with local, whether it's archaeologists or cultural heritage specialists and others to develop engaging content, and then how well that's distributed, which I would imagine would have, you know, implications on how well the receiving end and the sending end has access to internet and proper bandwidth and others for this. You also mentioned that the technology is evolving quickly, which once again has implications for capacity building. And, you know, the final point is that, you know, we know now that Southeast Asia, really all over the world, there's been a big decrease in the number of tourists. So everyone's talking about how we can build back better and greener and more inclusive. And maybe in the future, we'll have fewer tourists, but we'll have, you know, higher value or higher spending tourists. I think this technology is going to be incredibly important for that, for good heritage interpretation, which helps to add more value for the destination, can help with visitor management and others. So this is a fantastic overview that you've given us. And once again, I think it's really an interesting tool that we can use to help to promote a tourism restart or in the destinations in Southeast Asia. So I'm sure we're going to have some questions on how to do that when we go to the question and answer session. But before we go to our next speaker, who actually does have some experience developing virtual reality for tourism promotion, I'd like to get a better idea, you know, from the audience on what are some of the challenges that your destination is facing in terms of adopting virtual reality or augmented reality or other technologies to promote tourism. You know, is it the cost? Is it the capacity? We know that there's issue of connectivity, or perhaps, you know, cybersecurity concerns or others that may be linked to that.
So was that a question for me in particular?
If we have one, I guess we can, while we're doing the poll, if anything popped up in the box, let's just park that, and then we'll come back on questions after we go through the three speakers. Okay, so how'd we do on the poll? Look at this, you know, this issue of capacity. We think, you know, cuts across all destinations. And how do we go about developing this virtual reality content? Internet connectivity, you know, is also a concern. Another is the high cost of procuring the virtual reality systems. But when we come back to the question and answer session, Eric, I'd like you to weigh in on that. As you know, like we talk about high cost of procuring the hardware. Is it the hardware? Is it the software? Is it the maintenance? You know, what is it in terms of cost that we might see as a barrier to entry? Cybersecurity doesn't seem to be too much of a heavy concern on this. So that's great. Let's close the poll. And interesting that, you know, this idea of capacity was seen as one of the key constraints, because we're very fortunate to have as our next speaker someone that's actually worked on developing virtual reality in a training program. So with that, I'd like to introduce Ms. Raquel Perez Wong, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of iAcademy in the Philippines. Raquel brings to us some really valuable experience from her work with the Philippines Department of Tourism. So that's the National Tourism Organization for the Philippines, where she helped to launch, I think it was the country's first augmented reality tourism campaign and travel app for tourists. So with that, over to you, Raquel. We really like to hear about your experience and you know, how can we do it? How can we train people to deploy this amazing technology in Southeast Asian destinations? Thank you. Over to you.
All right. Thank you, Stephen. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you again for having me. My name again is Raquel, and I represent iAcademy. We are a school in Makati, Philippines. We specialize in high school and college programs that are centered on tech and design, like software engineering, game development, animation, and multimedia. And today, it's an honor to share how our love of telling stories and bringing different experience contributed to culture and nation building. Next slide, please. I don't see a lot of our, can you, yes, okay. I don't see a lot of our audience, but I can see some of us in the room here. But can we do a quick show of hands? How many say have worked on corporate communications or perhaps marketing? Has it ever happened to you that you already printed your PubMats and everything seems so perfect until you see this tiny typo error, right? Or you just finished printing an annual report and you're already preparing to hit print on the other one? A lot of us who mass produce printed materials could relate to this. Not only it's harder to make revisions, but the amount of paper and even money that we spend is quite a lot. And this is what triggered us to think of other ways on how we can minimize printed productions, but could still reach mass audience without compromising the substance and the experience we want to share. Next slide, please. Eric gave a very thorough definition of AR and VR earlier, but from a user standpoint, I like to give a very layman's understanding of it. On the left, virtual reality allows the user to remove herself from the current physical world and immerse herself to a simulated environment and experience. The video on the left shows an example of a recorded 360 visual image of the Philippine National Museum. I don't have an actual VR recorder, but basically that's sort of kind of the experience that you could have if you wear VR goggles. So imagine yourself wearing that. It can take you to any place and see it like you're in the actual location. AR, or augmented reality, on the other hand, lets the user experience real world in an augmented or enhanced manner. And in most cases, mobile phones are utilized for this purpose. Next slide, please. This is how we applied it to our marketing collaterals. Ladies and gentlemen, this is iAcademy Nexus Campus. This is the visual representation of our lobby, our ComLab, and even our green room. We are the first school in the Philippines to utilize this as a marketing tool. It's actually very easy. You just need a phone, and then you put the camera of your phone on top of the trigger. In this case, the trigger is our logo, and we identified other icons for triggers in other pages. The moment you hover your camera, it'll show you an image or destination it represents. This was very well received, and we thought, why don't we pitch this idea to the Philippine Department of Tourism? And that's the birth of our journey with the DOT to develop tech-driven tourism. Next slide, please. We're very fortunate for the trust and opportunity of the DOT gave us. We worked with them to develop a comprehensive travel guide app and, of course, injecting AR. We were lucky that we were still able to launch it before the lockdown brought by COVID-19. We were able to complete and still see phase one. Click on our next, please. We prioritize Fort Santiago, a historic tourism spot in Manila. We use the actual infrastructure like the churches as triggers. So whenever you hover your phone and tap it, it'll show you the specific church and how it looked like in a certain era. The goal here was to share historic visual representation of the sites in a cool and sustainable way. And then there's another work in progress. The AR feature in Fort Santiago required the user to be in front of the infrastructure. So we thought we should create a trigger that could be seen anywhere, and users will still enjoy the AR feature while browsing Philippine destination. Can you click the next one, please? So for example, the DOT, because we're very aggressive in promoting Philippines, they do a lot of caravans and world tours to promote the Philippines. So people they encounter may receive their giveaways, right? But if that person wants to share those information to someone else, but he doesn't want to share the actual physical, say, giveaways or brochure or tokens, it limits the sharing and expansion of sharing of information and experience. So AR can bring the Philippines at your fingertips. Because of these, our Philippine tourist fan can now share content of his material by merely asking the other person to hover his phone on a DOT logo found in any brochure, billboard, airports, or even as simple as in front of the computer. It is really bringing the information and experience right before your eyes at the convenience of a single tap. Next slide, please. These tools do not intend to replace actual traveling, but to make certain experiences possible even with the current barriers. The pandemic really has challenged us to think of creative ways to keep everyone connected and engaged. I'm also proud to share here today that apart from these, our DOT launched virtual cookouts, since Philippines is also known for its food, and they even launched a gamified virtual tour using the model of the famous escape room games. Next slide, please. We have seen a spike in Fort Santiago when we launched the AR project, and we're looking forward to do more collaborative projects to help our country bounce forward after this pandemic. VR or AR allows people to keep traveling and destinations in mind so that eventually everyone can really join in the fun. Next slide. Thank you, and looking forward to a fruitful Q&A later. Back to you, Stephen.
Nice, Raquel, nice, very exciting, you know. And there's some interesting takeaways too from this presentation. First, fantastic, great job. You know, when I get back to ADB headquarters in the Philippines, I'll look to use this. That's first of all. Secondly, you know, you bring out a good point on storytelling.
Right.
You know, this idea of, you know, to help to bring out the values of a destination, to make people think and make people remember, you know, and invoke emotions of visiting a site. We really want to bring out a good story. You know, so this idea of using these digital tools to help tell a better story about the destination, I think that's tremendously important, as is keeping the destinations top of mind. You know, we know that once tourism restarts, tourism will probably be more competitive than ever, where destinations, everybody is going to be after probably a fewer number of tourists to begin with. So those destinations that have these compelling stories, that are able to distribute this content widely, are going to have a tremendous comparative advantage, you know, once tourism does restart. I also like the way you highlighted mobile. You know, I mean, like, we need to get this on mobile technologies. Everybody has a mobile phone now. This is being used to book, to plan for travel, and to share experiences with others. So we really need to be thinking about how we can get this on an easy to use mobile format, so we can have it in front of as many eyes as possible. So nice job, that's great. You know, and once again, we looked at hearing more from you on the Q&A session. Well done. It looks like it's a lot of fun. You know, they say it's more fun in the Philippines, right?
It is more fun. And I think what even made it more fun is our students were the ones who developed these things. So imagine what they can, what greatness they can do after their stay in iAcademy, right? So that's that goes in line with the campaign of our DOT, because they want materials that are produced organically, that are endorsed to them by actual tourists or actual end users. So I think that's what makes it even more collective in that manner.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, and young people can certainly help to get the message out, you know.
Right.
Nice. Okay, great. Well, thanks very much. Stand by. Don't leave us. We have one more poll, you know, because once again, you know, we've had a nice introduction to the technologies. We've had a good presentation of how we're building capacity and deploying these technologies. But what I'd like to gauge the audience's views on is where you think that virtual reality or augmented reality can bring more value to urban tourism. You know, how we define value is many ways. That can be spending, that can be better community engagement, that can be better protection of the heritage sites that we have. It can be to help to facilitate fairer, more inclusive tourism. So if we could bring up the poll, our last poll of the session, and that is, you know, which of the following applications for virtual reality in the tourism sector present the most value for cities? So I'm going to call on the technical team to please bring up our final poll. Okay, I'm not getting the poll, but others may be.
It's on our screen here.
Okay, yeah, I can't see Jens, but maybe, what happened? Okay, got it. All right, great, there it is. There's the poll, you know. Okay, so we see that once again, we see there's the most value. Well, many of our participants think it has the most utility for marketing of tourist destinations. Also, pre-travel planning, which, as I mentioned before, that's going to be important. We want to keep our destinations on the top of mind of our visitors. So, pre-travel planning and management, education and heritage preservation was also mentioned about a quarter of the time. And probably the least number of visitors see this as a means of entertainment. And I would guess that's because probably we want to actually get to the destination and experience that. So, marketing, planning, and education and heritage preservation, we see these as three important applications for virtual augmented reality. So let's go ahead and close the poll. And now, we're going to have our final speaker of the day. And I'm really delighted to introduce Ms. Marceline Giroux, who's the founder and chief strategy officer behind VR World TV. This is and its new product, AWTY Travel. Marceline, she brings a tremendous amount of passion and engagement to using virtual reality technologies to promote sustainable tourism while helping to maximize community involvements and benefits. So I'm happy to introduce Marceline. Marceline, over to you, please. Joining us from Malaysia.
Thank you, Stephen. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Raquel and Eric. Very, very interesting. This is exactly how we thought initially. We thought that we have developed our entire website on WebXR to have better accessibility for everyone to travel virtually. The second problem that we was facing is that today we had 6 million application in app stores, or close to 6 million, and we didn't want to add another application because you can have as just a little application on your phone and to be at the top of the mind. We thought that accessibility was important, so we decided not to have an application but rather a website that is coded in WebXR. My co-founder is Fabien Le Guillaume, that has done for the past 15 years only virtual reality and augmented reality technology deployed around the world, servicing big brands, especially in event side for the CSS in the US. And we have also serviced a lot of international brands. And when it came to tourism, we wanted to bring something different because we saw the suffering of the industry. We saw that the people was dependent, or some destinations were very dependent on international tourism. And somehow this entire pandemic has reshifted the entire way of thinking. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you very much. So what we decided to do is, in fact, to make it accessible, to create a website where we can have a virtual reality and an augmented reality experience without developing an application. Then we understood that the entire tourism industry is based on experience, and virtual reality, in fact, is the best tool to develop experience. On the other hand, what exists today in the e-commerce is only to purchase products or purchase tickets or purchase a booking, but it was never really combined. And in addition to this, there was a lot of people that live on tourism. Those who create, in fact, the souvenirs, your craft that you bring back, the memories that you bring back. So it's an entire game from entertainment to edutainment. So we thought that we needed a place for each destination, for each cities, to be able to have in one place the virtual reality content, that is the emotional content, the augmented reality, that is the edutainment part for me. And in addition, to have the ability for this destination to sell goods, to sell what they do the best, whether it's craft, whether it's wine, whether it's sake, whether it's batik, whether it's jewelry, everything. So we are not creating, in fact, an e-commerce boutique, but we link this place that became, in fact, a virtual reality tourism board or tourism destination to, we link it to a commerce site where, in fact, once you are inside, you can have the full capacity of every bit in there that you need or what you do in a destination, but virtually. And we make it accessible whether you are a beginner or whether you are already an expert in virtual reality. So that was what we are bringing on the table for the tourism industry, and especially for the destination. So then we thought this entire project is not complete because destination is made by people, and people is what we take a selfie with. Like Stephen was mentioning, or Eric was mentioning, the indigenous people, the guy that we want to bring back with us. They also needed to be with us. And the only way that we can travel tomorrow again, and the only way that we are able, in fact, to have this memory back, is to protect these communities, to protect every hawker, street food vendor, museums, tour guides, etc. So we wanted to do something sustainable that is, in fact, created a program where celebrities that lives in their cities can voice out, show out their cities, and create a virtual reality live streaming. And from this virtual reality live streaming, in fact, the celebrity can showcase whatever they do every day when they were in lockdown. And these followers, in fact, by subscribing to this paid VR live streaming, must know that all the profit that we get goes to a pool to vaccinate all those who have not today access to vaccine against COVID-19. So that from this entire program that we are creating, it's also to give back, and essentially to those who are in need and cannot afford it. We know that the first jab of COVID-19 vaccine, in fact, is very easy, is the government will take place, we take in charge, and a lot of organization. But how long does it last? And we need to be united in this. These people that are working in cities are not non-essential people. They are, in fact, the most essential people, because they are the first ambassadors of tourism to restart tourism. And that's, in fact, what we wanted to do also in our website, our website site, not only to give the capacity from people to be able to book destination better, but also to wrap somehow charity in a form of dignity, where we can help give access to everybody to the vaccine COVID-19, especially those who work to restart the tourism. It's also to fight against inequalities, and it's to make simply available vaccine for all. So up to today, I would really thank every celebrity that came on board to pull off this event that we are creating, 36 hours virtual reality, virtual travel around the world to restart the tourism. Every city that has joined us up to date. And we welcome every city that wants to join us in the future to make this really something big. So we have signed, and we are in progress to sign also with Las Vegas to bring the biggest city entertainment to every home. Next slide, probably, Raquel, is just a visibility, just to show. So that's, in fact, what we can do from our home, is to see how street food are done. Next slide. To visit, to have a connection with people, what is today strongly needed. Next slide. And yes, and to get this experience that we could not have for 1 year. So heritage and culture, we preserve it using VR, but we do also edutainment using AR. But the most important is these people to welcome and to restart tourism, they need to have access to vaccine every single day. And again, thank you very much to all the celebrities that has joined us to pull off this 36 hours virtual events. Thank you. Any question, please ask Stephen to highlight it me or later.
Marceline, thank you. That's amazing. And I can say it's somewhat unexpected, in terms of this notion of, using virtual reality for, this social cause, and then to raise money for COVID-19 vaccinations. It's really amazing. and this idea of how, you're really bringing out what's so important for the destination. It's people, local people, local cultures, using these technologies to invite people into our homes, to see how a local artist produces cultural products or others. So we see there's a strong linkage not only to promoting tourism services, but also all these cultural industries and cottage industries and local artists and others have an opportunity to, promote and market their products and goods through this, which is really bringing back a lot of community benefits. So creating what I'd say a nice virtuous cycle. We talk virtual reality, augmented reality. This is certainly a virtuous cycle that you're deploying the technology for. So absolutely fantastic. And I think we're going to have some questions, and we'll start. Before we do, Jens is going to come in and wrap up, but I'd like to take a couple of questions from the floor. I'd also just like to mention that, Jens and the Mekong Tourism Coordinating Office are really, promoting Southeast Asia around the world. So these initiatives that you guys are talking about now, I really hope that we can connect with Jens after the webinar to help to, raise the profile of this amazing work that you're doing. I have a couple questions coming in from the floor, and the first one is going to be for you, Eric. This is actually from my friend David Ormsby. Actually, I follow him on Facebook, so thank you for joining us, David. One of the things is, do you see this technology as being something that's only available for the big guys, for example, national tourism organizations, the big brands and others? Or is this something also that smaller tourism operators can use? And how would you advise, Eric? Like if I'm I'm a small tourism operator, actually I'm sitting in a cafe here, that's a small enterprise. How would I get started, in using some of these technologies to promote my destination?
You will probably need to hire someone in the short term to do it, because you won't have time. There is a learning curve to start with. The issue is not the software. So you could develop something yourself in a couple of days. The issue is what happens when it disappears. How are you going to preserve the content and move it from one place to another? I went to a American workshop over 2 years. In the second year, they'd all done these wonderful augmented reality products, but the company had disappeared, and all the content that these people had built was online. So they lost the company, they lost the software, and they lost their own content. Does that make sense? So to answer your question, it is easily possible now, but for it to scale, I think you need an organization. And what I was trying to suggest is that it needs to be more part of an ecosystem where it can actually be open-ended. It doesn't have to be just vision-based. It can be audio, augmented reality. There's even olfactory augmented reality now. What was really needed is a plan, a business plan, if you like, where the content can move independently of the device, independently of the browser, and will last for X years, which would take a bit more thinking. And I think an easy way to look at it is virtual reality modeling language, VRML, failed because of very simple things, which we should not replicate with augmented mixed reality and so forth. One is it wasn't shareable easily. Two, you could not have multiplayers. You could not easily personalize it. There was a version for each browser, and it didn't have a killer application. So I would suggest it's probably better for a small organization to show it how it could be done and host it. And to see how it could be done, have a look at Sketchfab, which is a website with hundreds and thousands of 3D models, which can be augmented back on your phone or through Twitter, etc. So that would be, sorry, long answer.
Okay, no, nice. Actually, that actually touches on another question that we had is, where to go to find these resources, what programs should we use and others. So Sketchfab, you mentioned is one, because we had another question come on that.
Sketchfab is a presentation, really, but you could upload or you could download and see how people use it. Yes. Okay,
great. Okay, next question, actually, for you again, Eric, as well, is a lot of what we've seen and some of the examples have given focus on built heritage or, I guess, indoor settings. How about using virtual reality on outdoor settings, with 5D technologies and others? How feasible is that, or what are your recommendations for outdoor settings, virtual reality?
There's a company, and I think I just sent a link to one person who asked me, who uses 5G in these huge EU project grants on community cultural events outside. So 5G has problems inside, but outside is very interesting. For distributed cultural events, it's, I think, high potential. There's also in Europe, this use of tourism areas, attraction sites, playgrounds, etc., after hours. And they have, in a sense, live action role playing with people who come in and use the facilities. And there's a huge market for augmented reality tourism there. So the people sort of role play normally when the hotel or the playground is closed. And they use Polish castles, for example, and they have hundreds of people reenacting these medieval magical things. So I would say this huge area there. And outdoors, I think we're really talking about your phones or perhaps tablets. Yeah.
So yeah, so once again, I mean, getting stuff that you can do with your phone, important. Let me jump to Raquel. Raquel, could you give us an example? Once again, we have a number of questions coming in the boxes. It seems to be, is this something only for the big firms or big cities, or can smaller cities or smaller destinations do it? Could you give us an idea of what is the cost? You know, let's say for a destination to develop the content, to train people, to develop or maintain the platform, and then maybe to deploy that. I know there's probably a lot of flexibility and a large range in there, but if we were to talk to a medium-sized city and say, wow, we have this VR augmented reality and we have experience, could you give us an idea on what the costs are for something like that?
When we develop the ones that I showed earlier, I worked with 8 to 10 students, mostly who can do 2D and 3D arts, and then we had a full stack developer. So as much as skills that would require, you would need an artist and someone who can program from front end, back end, the user experience. As for the software you can use, we used ZBrush and Maya and Unity. I think Eric mentioned Unity also earlier, and Marceline. As far as other people trying to utilize this, I think there are also a lot of features now, even as simple in Facebook. You can do a 360 camera using your panoramic shots from your phone. You can upload it. And I think that's how you can engage local tour guides now. If they have anyone who would have smartphones or would have access to platforms with a 360, they can take shots, upload it. It would come up like if you upload it, you're right in the middle, standing in that specific location. I'm not sure if everyone has seen it, but NASA recently sent something in Moon, and now the 360 image of Mars, right? And now you can see what it looks like. You can see how your ground looks like, your surrounding looks like. As easy as using 360 panoramic captions, you can kind of share that kind of experience. But if you want to do a full AR at the very least, or VR, what it would require are artists 2D, 3D, and someone who has a full stack developer skills. And I guess the cost, for the cost, Steven, I think on our end, the only cost that I could remember is you need to pay a certain amount to be able to upload it to iOS so that Apple users can download that. And Android, I don't think there's a fee that's required. I just can't remember right now the exact amount, but for us, I think that's the only cost that was required from us. So yeah, that's that.
Okay, good. Yes, I mean, so like anything, we can be creative, in how we mobilize resources. You mentioned you use students. There are going to be some, I guess we'd say, cash outlays, maybe for some of the technology or for some of the maintenance. But depending on what's available, I mean, it can be done for not such a high cost.
That's right. And I think these things also you can do it in-house. You can also outsource. Like, for example, what we did with Fort Santiago, our students are fairly young. They're at the age of 18s, no older than 23. Of course, they're not aware how these churches look like in Spanish era or American era, because we were colonized by so many countries, right? They work with historians, so they didn't have blueprints. They just described, these are the cement that we use, the roof that was used, this is how it looked. And then from that standpoint, they just drew it. And I think that's, yeah. So someone can just draw that and then put that in AR or VR perspective as well. So it works to be creative and to collaborate as well, to those especially who would have the that rich of knowledge about a particular location, even if they're not there or they're elsewhere. Yeah.
Sure, sure. Yeah, and another extreme would just be hiring a firm to come in and do this, which I imagine would cost more. I want to jump to another one. This is more about, kind of hardware and internet connectivity. A number of participants have said, how do you deal with fluctuating internet connectivity? And actually, I want to ask everyone. So Marceline, let me start with you. Do you have issues of connectivity, being able to, have people access the content that you're distributing? I guess it would depend on what country you're broadcasting from, but any ideas on how to deal with connectivity issues? So let's start with you, Marceline. We'll come to Raquel, and then Eric, I'd like to have you also weigh in on that question.
We have a system that is behind our WebXR, our website, that allows, in fact, to optimize the content following the width bands. So today you can even have internet through satellites. So we work hard with experts in this field in order to be able to deliver the best content, in fact, to the viewer. Our website is free. So everybody can come and view the content. Another point that I wanted to add just now is that today GoPro, for example, are doing cameras for less than $450. That is 360 degrees. And you literally can connect it to your iPhone or your mobile phone and record it. So it means that the tour guides, in fact, can just put the camera next to him, record it like they were doing their job every single day. And we can literally live stream it directly on our website and sell it for him for, let's say, $10 a ticket. And our maximum is 2 million people, 2 million viewers, is exactly the same as you will hire a tour guide. But the difference is that this guy received maximum of the money by doing this, where he could not do. Same goes for exactly for entertainment, or for, if you can imagine, for the hop on, hop off, you would pay normally $25. So we can put a 360 camera on it. Again, it costs between a range of $500 to $2,000. Live streaming, that is internet cost. And in our back end, we make sure that the 3.5 million connected people in the world that has access to decent web internet connection, we have a backend that allows, in fact, the optimization part. So that is all part of our 10 years experience. When you deploy a project for big brands, you have to ensure that it works. So we make sure that it works very well. So you can imagine the Louvre, for example, last year when they did the VR or online streaming, they get 10 million visitors in 2 months. What is the most visited? So if you speak about small cities, take a tour guide, the city can sponsor a VR camera, 360 camera, let him do his job, we promote it, get him the money so that he can work in a sustainable way. So it goes for every heritage site. You want to learn more? Give us a 3D model. What Raquel is doing beautifully, give us a 3D model. We have a program behind that costs you nothing to transform this 3D model into AR on any platform. Because we have done it so many years for Accor hotels, when you view the rooms, etc. So VR, AR, is what we are doing the best for the 15 years. So we have the back end, we have the system. So Raquel is creating, in fact, the job of tomorrow that does not exist today. And that is what 4.0 technology is bringing to the next generation, creating jobs that does not exist today. That's very, very important. Marketing in 4.0 does not exist today. That's facts.
Nice. I mean, yeah, one of the questions was, is it worth investing in? So Raquel, what do you think? Is it worth getting the extra bandwidth to get the message out, considering the scalability?
Definitely worth investing in. I think coming from an educational point of view, we always think of things from end to end. So from us, it's upskilling of people who will develop it and who will use it, down to actually implementing these things where people can enjoy it. And that's why, that's why I'm very excited to have a chat with Marceline after this. of course, we continue to look for ways on how we can innovate and put these things to so that more people can experience. But I like the mention on the use and the requirement of data. That's actually the first thing that we wanted to address when we developed our AR feature in the DOT comprehensive travel guide app. Some of the use of the app, like browsing to the destination, would require internet, but specifically we designed the AR feature deliberately that it will not require data. So as long as you download the Experience Philippines app and you want to use the AR feature, it doesn't require anyone, at least from our end, to have internet connection or data. And we can do that with the amount of or number of assets that you store in your own server. So it only depends. It will only entail cost from the developer side if you want to put more assets in that server. But for as long as it meets your immediate prioritization, you can design it in such a way that for some of its use, it will not require the user to be connected anywhere. And I think that's what's fantastic about it, where you can experience it anywhere without having to grapple around a very stable internet. So yeah.
Nice. Quickly, Eric, just give us some sage advice on bandwidth.
Always a problem, but you think of your phone as an input device as well. So initially, mixed reality in particular was bad. You'd had to keep referring to it. It needs to be planned in. I've been to museums, national museums, that tell me they have a wonderful public internet, and it didn't. So I agree, internet access can be a problem, but have a look at the AR business frameworks. Work with local businesses who provide Wi-Fi, etc., in return for persuading people to go there after the experience. So that's what I would suggest. And secondly, yes, the devices and the frameworks are getting better at caching them and bringing them in when you need them. But ideally, some of the content will be provided through your phone, which is a voice recorder. It's got biofeedback, it's got a gyroscope, it's got a microphone, etc. So let's be creative.
Okay, nice. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Very insightful, everyone. Thank you. I really appreciate these insightful answers, great advice, and it certainly makes me feel excited to think of how we can get this started in some destinations that aren't using it to its full potential. With that, I'm gonna give the floor to my long-term colleague, Mr. Jens Tranhart, the Executive Director of the Mekong Tourism Coordinating Office. Jens has developed many award-winning destination marketing campaigns. He has experience from North America, experience all over Asia. He's really an expert on marketing and digital marketing. And he's as I said, the Executive Director of the Mekong Tourism Coordinating Office, where he's directing the joint marketing efforts of 6 countries in the Mekong region and in Southeast Asia. So Jens, what do you think? How can we use this technology, or how can we be better using this technology to, I guess, promote a safe and an efficient tourism restart in destinations in Southeast Asia?
Thank you, Stephen, for the introduction, and it's an honor to be here with you on this panel. I think it was fantastic to listen to the 3 speakers, and I think some really great projects. I actually have been following VR for about 10 years now, and obviously at that time it wasn't really mainstream, but it's great to see that now a lot more tourism boards are looking at it. And I just wanted to mention one, and because actually the use case is quite relevant for today. So the German Tourism Board has actually used VR experiences, also connected it to tour guides. So through that, and they started it last August, I believe. So really as a COVID exercise. And when they asked the CEO, Ms. Hedorfer, why she's doing it, if she's looking to boost trips afterwards, she said, well, they first wanted to keep travelers or the destination top of mind. And you mentioned that as well, Stephen. But what they found out is actually it's also a great tool to build confidence. And first, that confidence was more on the domestic level, but they also see that when borders open again, this could be a great tool, because people obviously will need to have the confidence to go into a destination and their various hurdles. So it's not just like pumping money into advertising and say, hey, we're open, come visit us. There are different hurdles. And this could familiarize someone to look at the destination, what are some of the measurements that they put in place? Is it actually safe to go there? So I think this could actually be an interesting tool, which hasn't really been discussed so much. So I thought that was quite interesting. I think the other issue was that obviously heritage sites, and I've talked to professors and researchers before, obviously during the whole time of over tourism, when some of these heritage sites were at the verge of almost like collapsing, where some of them had to be closed down for some time. Obviously, virtual reality can be a tool where still it provides access to these wonderful and amazing heritage sites, but not ruining it and preserving it. So I think that could be another application. I think one of the issues that we've had over the years with VR, and maybe some of the speakers can comment on that, was to have a brand that basically takes VR mainstream. And I think just maybe a couple of months ago, maybe I don't know exactly when, Amazon launched Amazon Explore. And people familiar with VR, they believe that actually Amazon Explore could be a catalyst to take VR mainstream. And so I'd like to pose that question to the speakers. But before I do that, I wanted to quickly answer your question, Stephen, as it relates to the Mekong region or ASEAN or some of the member countries in Southeast Asia. I do agree with you. I think definitely this could be a tool, not only to drive confidence and not only to market the destination, which the survey showed, but especially from countries, let's say in Europe or North America, there's still some kind of hesitation sometimes to travel to this part of the world. And I'm sure, Steve, you being American, sometimes probably your friends call you and say, hey, what, is it safe to come to Laos? Is it safe to go to Cambodia? So I mean, virtual reality might help to kind of just, kind of get people a little bit more comfortable to travel. So I think it's a great application, but as the speaker said, it's still, somewhat unexplored. And I think for some member countries, it would be a big step forward. Talking about Thailand, Thailand has done something actually on VR on their MICE industry. So TCEP, which is the Thailand Convention Exhibitors Bureau, they have used VR to give meeting planners access to the venues and show them, what they can experience when they book an event in Thailand. So that's, I think, quickly what I can say. I'm not an expert in VR, but I'm fascinated with it for many years. And with that, maybe I'd like to ask the expert speakers, what they think if Amazon Explore can really take VR into the mainstream, or if there are other issues. Thank you, Stephen. And
great, thanks, James. Yeah, I'll let the panelists come in and weigh in on your question. So anyone wants to take that one on, please go ahead.
Okay, I will take this one. For the point is that today we have YouTube, Facebook, and Amazon, of course, that is able to stream VR for free. Two of them are banned in China, unfortunately, and we know in other sites, Chinese are the most traveling population at the moment in the world, as said by UNWTO. The point is that you can find everything and anything on this website. That's on the Facebook or on YouTube. You can really find anything, everything. The point is that you need to focus on industry. If you want to help the tourism industry or the education industry or the surgery or the medical side or the engineering side, that you need to specialize for them, because you want the people attention on creating values for these guys. What 360 brings, in fact, if it comes and what we hope becomes popular, and let's say people wants to check how your next surgery is going to work and put the VR goggles and see how it works, that makes them comfortable. That's exactly the same application that you have in the tourism industry. By saying, should I wear a mask? Should I bring gloves, etc., etc. So it's the same thinking. It's the same scary stuff that we have in us. What VR brings is really the comforting side. Today, the technology has the ability to be driven not only by eyes, but by sound. We use two senses mainly in VR, and we can initiate the third sense, that is the sense of taste. So if Amazon are able to bring it, then they have to think about categorizing it and thinking more to service the people and the industry, I guess, both together. And at this moment, it's not done. So that's probably the reason why we created it. But yeah, main problem was this. In Facebook, after 10 minutes, your post is gone. On YouTube, you have to search really thoroughly, going by hashtag, going by destination, going by experience. So again, it's searching. It's a lot of work for those who wants to book a destination. But I agree with him. It gives a certain comfort to be able to try before you go. That's the most important, try before you go. And if you can try before you go and do good in the same time, that's jackpot.
Great. I see the organizers have given us another 5 or 10 minutes. So Eric or Raquel, if you'd also like to respond to that question, will we have time?
He's mute.
I was just saying, Raquel, would you like to go first?
Sure. I just want to echo what Marceline has pointed out, because there are a lot of tools that are available out there, but some of them are not accessible to some places here. So I guess it's also being creative and finding ways on how we can make these things available and cluster them so that it doesn't require immediate requirement of all these things to be able to deploy something that the public can use. And I think more than marketing and educating them about certain destinations, it could be used in many other ways as well, especially now that we need information that are accurate and that are very timely. And with utilization of these technological tools, it can make it even more engaging across ages, and it touches on different demographics as well. So I hope there would be more providers that could develop things that could be more accessible and even easier to use, so that we encourage developers and content creators to develop more for our use. Thanks, Stephen.
Can I briefly add? We've developed workflows for completely free tools, from photogrammetry to 3D to AR, but I agree the commercial tools are more powerful. Amazon is controlling roughly half the internet, and all the VR developers I talk to seem to be using it. Facebook controls Oculus, which is perhaps the most consumer level successful VR headset. Apple is developing things. I don't know what's going to happen this year, but the formats I was suggesting to you, I think is something to consider, because you don't want to be locked into one company with one software, one content, one VR device. So in answer to you, yes, it could be simpler, but I believe that perhaps academics should work closer with, say, the tourism industry and develop frameworks to show them how it could be used. That would be my suggestion.
Well, thank you very much. And I think these are excellent parting words of wisdom. I really want to thank Raquel, Jens, Eric, Marceline for sharing all, your deep knowledge and experience with using virtual reality, augmented reality, both as a developer, as a user, as an academic, as someone that's getting it out to the public worldwide. I especially appreciated some of these innovations, linking it to social enterprises, involving young people on training. I guess spreading the risk, as Eric mentioned, by using a variety of tools. So I think that this is a really, really relevant and timely webinar in that these tools and these ideas that were presented today, I think they can be taken up all across the spectrum, from small operators in tourist destinations, small cities, medium-sized cities, and we've seen some good examples from national tourism organizations as well. So I want to thank you so much, for joining us, for taking time to join us today. I really want to sincerely thank all the participants that joined us. We're still at over 100 participants that stayed for the entire webinar, asked some really thought-provoking questions. So that was great. As Christine mentioned, when she launched the webinar, we'll be distributing the materials through email. We hope that you can sign up for our next webinar and join us in the series for future events. The April webinar is going to be about community planning and community involvement in urban planning. So once again, that's another interesting topic, bringing local people in to plan for urban developments in places where they live. And also, we have a social media platform and a website where we're distributing information about the seminar series. Finally, once again, I'd like to sincerely thank the Government of Australia, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade for financing and generous support in many ways for our ASEAN Australia Smart Cities Trust Fund. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. And I guess I'd really like to say, as much as I would love to have more virtual reality experiences, what I would like even more is to meet you all in person when we're able to travel again. So I hope that we can meet again in person and travel again, and we can combine that with a virtual experience, a virtual reality experience in one of the destinations in Southeast Asia, in Australia, Malaysia, and others, you know, wherever country we're from. So once again, we're going to close the webinar now. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to the next event. Thank you so much.